Malik Johnson was having a normal evening, sitting in his small apartment, watching the last quarter of a basketball game. The air was filled with the sound of sneakers squeaking on the hardwood court and the commentator's excited voice. He had no idea his life was about to take a drastic turn. A sudden, thunderous knock on the door made him jump. "Police, open up." Before he could react, the door swung open violently. Armed officers flooded into his apartment, their guns drawn. "Get on the ground." "Now," one of them shouted. "What's going on?" A knee pressed into Malik's back, cutting off his words. Cold steel snapped around his wrists. His face was smashed against the floor, and the rough carpet burned his cheek. "You're under arrest for armed robbery," an officer declared. Malik's stomach dropped. Armed robbery? He hadn't even left his apartment that evening. "This is a mistake." "I didn't do anything," he protested. But the officers didn't care. As they dragged him outside, neighbors stood in their doorways, whispering. Some shook their heads, others looked away. Malik was thrown into the back of a police car, confusion and fear twisting in his gut. This wasn't about justice. It was something else. Malik sat in the courtroom, shackled at the wrists. Across from him, the prosecutor smirked, flipping through his files. The evidence against him was laughable, grainy security footage of a masked figure robbing a liquor store. Judge Walter Grayson, an older man with cold blue eyes, barely let the defense speak before making his stance clear. "Mr. Johnson, given the nature of this crime, I see no reason to delay. I recommend the maximum sentence." The words hit Malik like a hammer. Maximum sentence? The trial had barely begun. "Your Honor, this is absurd." Malik's court-appointed lawyer, a nervous man in a cheap suit, tried to protest. "I've made my decision," Judge Grayson snapped. Malik's stomach twisted. He had heard about corrupt judges, men who saw black defendants as guilty before the trial even started. Now, he was in the middle of it. Just as the gavel was about to come down, the courtroom doors burst open. A woman strode in, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She was tall, confident, and dressed in a sleek black suit. "Apologies for my delay," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "I'm Malik Johnson's new attorney." Judge Grayson's face turned pale, because he knew exactly who she was. The woman standing before them was Naomi Carter, one of the most feared defense attorneys in the state. And she had history with Judge Grayson. "This is highly irregular," Judge Grayson muttered, shifting in his seat. "No," Naomi corrected, placing her briefcase on the table. "What's irregular is trying to sentence an innocent man before the defense even presents its case." She opened a file and began to lay out the facts. The security footage timestamp didn't match. Malik had been on a phone call during the robbery. His alibi was solid. His best friend had testified that they were watching the game together at the time of the crime. But then Naomi dropped the real bombshell. She slid a thick document onto the judge's bench. "This is a list of defendants who have been unfairly sentenced in this courtroom. The majority of them black men, convicted on weak or non-existent evidence." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Judge Grayson's face reddened. "This is outrageous," the prosecutor stammered. "No, what's outrageous," Naomi shot back, "is how many innocent lives have been destroyed in this courtroom." She turned to Malik. "Mr. Johnson, tell the court, where were you on the night of the robbery?" Malik swallowed hard. "At home, watching the game with my friend Darius. I have phone records to prove it." Naomi nodded. "And yet, the prosecution insists you were robbing a liquor store across town at the same time." She faced the jury. "How is that possible?" Silence. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "The evidence." "What evidence?" Naomi snapped. "A blurry video? A faulty witness statement? Or is it just convenient for this system to lock up another innocent black man?" Judge Grayson shifted uncomfortably. The jury was watching him now. The jury was out for less than 10 minutes. The verdict was unanimous. Malik Johnson was innocent. But it didn't end there. Naomi had come prepared. As soon as the trial ended, she handed a file to a journalist sitting in the back row. Hours later, headlines flashed across the news. Judge Walter Grayson accused of wrongful convictions. Malik stepped out of the courthouse a free man, but he knew he would never be the same. He had faced the worst of the system and survived. And as Judge Grayson was placed under investigation, Malik realized one thing. Naomi Carter hadn't just saved him. She had started a movement. Malik Johnson walked out of the courthouse a free man, but the air around him felt heavy. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, and strangers clapped as he stepped onto the courthouse steps. His hands were still shaking. Naomi Carter placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Malik. You're free." But Malik could see the tension in her eyes. He knew better than to think it was over. Judge Walter Grayson was corrupt, and powerful men like him didn't go down without a fight. Sure enough, as Naomi and Malik reached her car, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her face darkening. "Who is it?" Malik asked. Naomi exhaled sharply. "An old enemy." She answered. A deep, gravelly voice came through the speaker. "Naomi Carter, you've made a dangerous mistake." Malik stiffened. He didn't recognize the voice, but Naomi did. "Hello, District Attorney Caldwell," she said evenly. "You embarrassed a sitting judge. Do you know how many people you've pissed off today?" Caldwell's voice was slow, calculated. "Justice isn't about keeping powerful people happy," Naomi replied. A short chuckle. "You think this is over? Think again." Malik Johnson was a convenient target, but he wasn't the only one. Naomi's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "Your little stunt put a spotlight on Grayson. Now, there are people scrambling to cover up their tracks. If I were you, I'd watch my back." The line went dead. Naomi sat still, gripping the steering wheel. Malik could feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest. "What does he mean? Are they coming after us?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She started the car, her hands steady, her mind racing. "This goes deeper than Grayson. There are people in this city, judges, prosecutors, even cops, who built their careers on wrongful convictions. And now they're scared." She glanced at Malik. "We just exposed one of them. But that means the rest will fight back." Malik swallowed hard. He had thought the worst was over. But he was wrong. The next morning, Malik woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating on his nightstand. He groggily reached for it, his head still heavy from yesterday's chaos. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Silence. Then, "You should have stayed in jail." Click. Malik sat up, his pulse racing. He stared at the phone, his breath coming in short gasps. A threat. His stomach twisted. He had expected pushback from the system, but this was different. This was personal. He immediately called Naomi. She picked up on the second ring. "Malik? What's wrong?" "I just got a call. Someone said I should have stayed in jail." Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then, "Pack a bag. You're staying with me." Malik didn't argue. If there was anyone who knew how to handle pressure, it was Naomi. Within an hour, he was in her apartment, sitting at her dining table with a cup of coffee he couldn't bring himself to drink. Naomi was on the phone, pacing. "Yes, he got a threat." "No, we don't know who it was," she said into the phone. "But I need a name, and I need it now." She hung up and turned to Malik. "I called a friend at the police department. Someone's watching you." "Watching me? Why? I'm just some guy who—" "No." She cut him off. "You're not just some guy, Malik. You're proof that the system is broken. If you stay quiet, they win. If you keep speaking out, they lose." Malik exhaled sharply. "So what do we do?" Naomi's eyes flashed with determination. "We fight back. Harder than ever." Before Malik could respond, there was a knock at the door. Naomi frowned. "Stay here." She moved toward the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. Then she sighed and opened it. A man in his late 40s stood there, wearing a wrinkled suit and looking over his shoulder nervously. His face was weathered, his eyes darting like a man who had spent his life running from something. "Detective James Monroe," he introduced himself quickly. "I need to talk to you. Both of you." Naomi hesitated, then stepped aside. Monroe walked in, closed the door behind him, and locked it. "All right, listen to me," he said in a low voice. "You both need to leave town. Now." Malik and Naomi exchanged a glance. Why? Naomi asked. Monroe ran a hand through his graying hair. Because Judge Grayson isn't the only corrupt official in this city. You've just pissed off some very powerful people. And they don't like loose ends. Malik felt his stomach turn to ice. You're saying they want me dead? Monroe nodded grimly. Not just you. Naomi, too. You both just made yourselves targets. The room fell silent. Finally, Naomi spoke. Then we need to hit them first. Monroe stared at her. You don't understand. These people aren't just breaking the law. They are the law. You can't win against them. Naomi folded her arms. Watch me. Malik could hardly believe what he was hearing. Just yesterday, he had been an innocent man fighting for his freedom. Now he was caught in a war much bigger than he had imagined. And there was no way out. The air in Naomi's apartment felt heavy, charged with tension. Malik sat rigid in his chair, trying to process Detective Monroe's words. You both need to leave town. Now. Naomi, however, didn't even flinch. She folded her arms and met Monroe's gaze. Running isn't an option. Monroe sighed, rubbing his temple. You don't get it, Carter. The people after you aren't street thugs. They're the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. You think exposing one corrupt judge is enough? Grayson was just a puppet. The real power is higher up. Malik finally spoke. Then tell us, who's behind this? Monroe hesitated, glancing at the locked door as if expecting someone to barge in at any moment. The same people who put you in that courtroom, Malik. They needed a fall guy, and you were convenient. Naomi narrowed her eyes. You're talking about District Attorney Caldwell. Monroe exhaled sharply. Him and more. The DA's office, certain cops, even city officials. They've been orchestrating wrongful convictions for years. It's about money. Grants, promotions, private prisons. Locking up innocent people keeps the system running. And now, you just tore a hole in their operation. Malik clenched his fists. The thought of his life being nothing more than a tool for someone else's gain made his blood boil. Naomi leaned forward. You came here for a reason, Monroe. What aren't you telling us? Monroe hesitated. Then, lowering his voice, he said, There's a hit out on you. Silence. Malik felt his pulse in his throat. What? Monroe nodded. Not a warning, not a scare tactic, an actual hit. Caldwell's people want this problem gone before it spreads. That means you, Naomi, and anyone else who knows too much. Naomi's expression darkened. How much time do we have? Not much. I intercepted a message on the police scanner. They're making it look like a gang hit. If you two are found dead, it'll be ruled as street violence. No questions asked. Malik swallowed hard. He had already been wrongfully arrested. Now, the same system wanted him dead. Naomi grabbed her phone. Then we go on the offensive. We need evidence, something that exposes everyone involved. Monroe shook his head. That's suicide. It's justice, Naomi corrected. Monroe sighed, checking his watch. If you're serious, I know where to start. But it's risky. Malik took a deep breath. We don't have a choice. Monroe nodded. Then let's move. We don't have much time. The streets were unusually quiet as Monroe drove, keeping one eye on the rearview mirror. Malik sat in the back, his body tense. Naomi was in the passenger seat, scanning through her phone. Where are we going? Malik finally asked. Monroe's grip tightened on the wheel. An old informant of mine, Andre Mason, used to be a low-level operator for Caldwell's people before he turned snitch. If anyone knows where the skeletons are buried, it's him. They pulled up to a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. Flickering neon lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of damp asphalt filled the air. Stay close, Monroe muttered as they stepped out. They approached room 214. Monroe knocked twice, then once more. The door opened just a crack. A single bloodshot I peeked through. Monroe? What the hell are you doing here? The man rasped. Andre, we need to talk, Monroe said. Andre hesitated, then unlatched the door. The stench of cigarette smoke and cheap whiskey hit them as they stepped inside. The man was thin, unshaven, and clearly paranoid. He wiped his nose, glancing around nervously. You bringing trouble to my doorstep, Monroe? Already got trouble, Andre, Monroe replied. We need dirt on Caldwell. Something big. Andre let out a dry laugh. Caldwell? Man, you're playing with fire. That bastard's got half the city under his thumb. Naomi stepped forward. Then help us cut it off. Andre sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. All right, I got something. But if I give it to you, I'm dead. You're already dead if you don't, Monroe said bluntly. Andre hesitated, then reached under the bed, pulling out a small USB drive. This has everything. Wire transfers, fake evidence reports, names. If this gets out, Caldwell goes down. Naomi took the drive carefully. We need to get this to someone who can broadcast it publicly. The moment this hits the news, Caldwell loses his power. Andre looked at them. Then you better move fast. Because I can guarantee someone already knows you're here. As if on cue, the sound of screeching tires filled the air outside. Malik's stomach dropped. Naomi peeked through the window. Black SUVs. Tinted windows. No plates. They found us, she whispered. Andre's face went pale. Oh, hell no. I'm out. But before he could bolt, the first gunshot shattered the motel window. Down. Monroe shouted. The room exploded into chaos. Bullets tore through the thin motel walls as Malik dove behind an overturned table. Naomi grabbed the USB drive and shoved it into her pocket. We need to get out of here. Monroe fired back through the window, his face set in grim determination. We're pinned down. Andre was curled up in the corner, cursing under his breath. I knew this was a bad idea. Malik felt adrenaline surge through his veins. Just hours ago, he was a wrongfully accused man trying to clear his name. Now he was in the middle of a shootout, fighting against a system that wanted him erased. A system that never expected him to fight back. Naomi grabbed his arm. Malik. The back door. They scrambled toward the bathroom, kicking open the tiny window. The alley behind the motel was dark and empty. Go. I'll cover you. Monroe barked. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. She pulled Malik through the window, and they landed hard on the asphalt. Gunfire still rang from the front of the motel. Where do we go now? Malik panted. Naomi pulled out her phone, her fingers moving fast. We send the files. Now. She tapped the screen and uploaded the entire USB drive to an encrypted server. Seconds later, every major news outlet in the city received the files exposing District Attorney Caldwell's corruption. But the fight wasn't over yet. Because now, Caldwell knew exactly who had betrayed him. And he wouldn't stop until Malik and Naomi were buried. The city was alive with chaos. Sirens blared, news stations flashed breaking. Massive corruption scandal exposed across their screens, and District Attorney Caldwell's name was plastered everywhere. The evidence Naomi had leaked had gone viral. But it also meant one thing. Caldwell was desperate. Malik and Naomi had barely escaped the motel shootout with their lives. Detective Monroe had stayed behind, laying down cover fire, giving them a chance to run. But they hadn't heard from him since. Now, they were crouched in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts, trying to catch their breath. Naomi checked her phone. The files are out. The whole city knows. Malik wiped sweat from his forehead. Then why do I feel like we're still in danger? Naomi's phone buzzed. A blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. I warned you, Naomi. Came Caldwell's voice, cold and sharp. You should have walked away. Naomi's grip tightened. Your time is up, Caldwell. The evidence is out. It's over. A chilling laugh. Is it? Look around, Naomi. You're still running. You think the truth will save you? The system doesn't fall overnight. But you won't even live to see the morning. The call ended. Malik's chest tightened. We need to get out of here. Naomi nodded. No more hiding. We finish this. Naomi had one last move to make. She called the only person who could ensure Caldwell wouldn't walk away from this. Chief of Police, Raymond Briggs. Briggs was a straight shooter, one of the few uncorrupted men left in the system. If anyone had the power to take Caldwell down, it was him. Briggs, Naomi said quickly. You saw the files. You know everything now. Briggs' voice was firm. I did. And I've already got officers searching for Caldwell. But Naomi, he's making moves. I heard chatter. He's sending someone after you and Malik. You're not safe. We never were, she muttered. Can you meet us? Briggs hesitated. Where? Naomi took a deep breath. Grayson's courthouse. The place this all started. A pause. Then, I'll be there. But be careful. She hung up. Malik looked at her like she was insane. We're walking right into the courthouse? The place where Caldwell's people still work. Yes, Naomi said. Because the only way to win is to make sure the whole world sees it. They arrived at the courthouse just before midnight. The steps were eerily empty, the city still buzzing with the fallout of the scandal. But as soon as they stepped inside, they knew something was wrong. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Then gunfire. Naomi and Malik dove behind a marble pillar as bullets ricocheted off the walls. From the shadows, a group of men emerged, armed deadly. Caldwell's personal hit squad. And leading them? Judge Walter Grayson. You didn't think I'd go down that easy, did you? Grayson sneered, his gun raised. Malik's blood ran cold. You're working for Caldwell? Grayson chuckled. Oh, Malik, I don't work for anyone. Caldwell and I, we're partners. Naomi gritted her teeth. You're a disgrace. Grayson stepped forward. You really think you've won? That some files will change anything? The system doesn't break because of a few headlines. It survives. It adapts. Malik's fists clenched. Not this time. Suddenly, the courthouse doors burst open. Chief Briggs and a squad of SWAT officers stormed in. Drop your weapons. Briggs' voice boomed through the hall. The hitmen hesitated, too late. Gunfire erupted. Bullets flew as SWAT engaged Grayson's men. Naomi pulled Malik down, shielding him behind a row of benches. Then, Grayson made a run for it. Naomi saw him bolt toward the back exit. He's getting away. Malik didn't think. He ran. He chased Grayson through the courthouse halls, adrenaline pumping, heart pounding. The corrupt judge turned a corner, only to find himself face to face with a locked door. Trapped. He spun around, gun shaking in his hand. You don't have to do this, Grayson, Malik said, breathing hard. It's over. Grayson's eyes darted wildly. No, it's never over. You think you're a hero? You think exposing us changes anything? Malik took a step closer. You've already lost. Grayson exhaled sharply. Then, suddenly, he raised his gun. A single gunshot rang out. But it wasn't Grayson's. Briggs had fired. The bullet hit Grayson in the shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor, his weapon clattering away. The judge groaned, clutching his wound. SWAT officers stormed in, pinning him down, cuffing him. Naomi ran in, catching her breath. Briggs holstered his gun, looking at Malik. You okay? Malik swallowed hard. He was shaking, but he nodded. It was over. For real this time. 1 week later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, and citizens filled every seat. Grayson sat at the defendant's table, his face pale, his arrogance gone. Across from him, District Attorney Caldwell sat in handcuffs, his expression blank. The trial was just beginning, but everyone knew the verdict. Naomi sat beside Malik in the audience. You did it, she whispered. Malik shook his head. We did it. The judge banged the gavel. Court is now in session. Malik exhaled. This time, the law was on the right side.